Hi, Peter Charles here, and we're going to take a look at this TTArtisans 25mm f2 for Fujifilm X mount and answer the question, should you buy one? Okay, let's take a look at this 25mm f2 TTArtisans lens. It's a little pancake design, as you can see, very tiny lens. And let's take a look at the build first. You've got a nice metal lens cap that screws on. And as you can see, it takes a 43mm filter, f2 design. It's all metal, all mechanical, which is nice. It has a nice firm focusing ring, which works quite nicely. However, I'm not super crazy about the aperture ring. A couple of things. It's got a very tiny knurling to grab hold of. So when you have the camera to your face, it's hard to sometimes use your finger to find that and get a grip on it. I tend to grab the focusing ring by mistake. But the bigger issue is look at these spacings for the aperture. Very wide between f2 and f2.8, and it gets progressively narrower as you get towards f16. It's not linear. And there is no deterrence between the f-stops except for where that dot is between f2 and f2.8. So definitely the aperture ring could have been done better. Other than that, build quality, it's nice, it's well put together, and it's as I say, a nice compact little design. Now, I shot a bunch of pictures on this lens, and previously I had used it mostly at short range, indoors in particular, in the studio quite a bit. And I did some photography with my X Pro 3, and I had it on JPEG plus RAW, and I had the JPEG color simulation set to classic chrome. So I went out and took a bunch of pictures, and let's see the result, and let's see what kind of issues I came across. Okay, this is a picture of my bookcase. It's my fishing books, and it's shot at f8 at ISO 1600. And the first thing we notice is the strong barrel distortion, which really isn't a problem because we can take it out in post. So if we zoom into the center section, we can see it's reasonably sharp. And then if we zoom over to the corner, it's not bad either. So at f8, the lens doesn't do that bad a job at resolving, small details. Okay, this is an old mill wall, and it's shot at f2 ISO 160. And if we look at the center section and zoom in, we can see that center is reasonably sharp. But when we move out to the corners, it starts to get quite mushy. Also, along with the barrel distortion, there's also some heavy vignetting at f2 as well. Okay, this photo of a fence line is showing where the problems really start to happen. The fence line itself is reasonably sharp, though the grass beneath it is not that sharp overall. That's kind of odd when you think of the fence rail being sharp. But then when we look at the trees, you can see that the middle trees are quite out of focus, but the ones to the sides are a tad sharper. And to me that suggests we've got a field curvature problem going on. In this photo we can really see where the problems are. Again, shot at f2. Nothing in this photo was sharp, right from foreground to background. And what I was finding is that it was impossible to focus. Focus peaking showed pretty well the entire field and all of the trees in focus. And there was a reason for that, because none of it was in focus. And when you think about focus peaking algorithm, it's going to be looking for a contrast between sharp and not sharp. And in this case, there was no contrast. Everything was soft, so everything was shown as in focus. And here's a good illustration of what was going on. The photo on the left of the grain silos was taken with the lens at infinity. And in theory, it should be quite sharp when done at infinity. The one on the right was with the lens set at 3 meters. And it's the one that's sharp. In theory, if I had set it at f8 and 3 meters, that silo should not be sharp, but the grass in front of me should be sharp. And that's not the case. Shot at infinity, the rocks, the tree, and the grain silos are all shown to be in focus with focus peaking. All of these items were lit up by focus peaking. The house, the trees on the left, the wires, everything was lit up by focus peaking. And none of it is actually sharp. And what's happening is focusing beyond infinity, and that's what's going on. Okay, here we have a shot that was originally produced in RAW. And then to the right side, what I've done is I've brightened the shadows, and the slider is 100% applied. Now you've seen the picture has come apart, basically, it's a mess, but we still really haven't recovered much information from the shadow areas, indicating there really wasn't much there to begin with, which shows a contrast problem. Okay, basically the same scene, only with the brightening applied with a bit more of a subtle touch. It's still not a great shot, but you know, if you were trying to get a certain effect out of an image, this might not be that bad, but generally it shows you that you can't really recover from that contrast problem. Okay, let's answer the question, should you buy one? Well, you've got some problems that can be dealt with in post. The vignetting, the barrel distortion, we can deal with that. Contrast gets a little trickier, but yeah, you can probably manage that as well for most applications. But if you have an exposure problem, recovery from the exposure problem is not going to be that great. I mean, yeah, build quality is nice. It's a nice small lens. It'll be good for street photography because you're focusing at relatively short distances. And it does work. You can focus at short distances using peaking or one of the other focusing aids. That'll work just fine. It's when we get to around infinity that this thing starts to become a fiddle. And so, you know, should you buy it considering all of that? Well, it has the flange distance problem. The flange distance is not correct. This is an X-mount mounting system on here. When I've looked at pictures of this lens for other APS-C systems, they all look the same. So all they're doing is changing this back plate where the bayonet is. Obviously, the distance is wrong for Fujifilm. Doesn't mean it's going to be wrong for other companies, other systems, I should say. So is that a deal breaker? Well, I think for general purpose photography, it is a deal breaker. If I was just going to use this as a walking around lens, that becomes a problem because you've always got to remember you just can't rack it out to infinity and shoot if you're doing landscapes. You're going to have to set it on 3 meters and work from that because you can't focus once you get past infinity. All your focusing aids become useless. So focus peaking shows everything in focus, for example. And when you're trying to use split image, it's really weird. It's like you really can't precisely focus. So it starts to get annoying. However, if you're looking to do some photography and you want this appearance of an old lens, and I mean really old lens, like a 100-year-old lens, this is actually quite a good lens if you want to imitate old film lenses. I mean, the coatings on here are obviously not very good. That's why we have the contrast problem. That's what old lenses will look like. And the out of focus areas at f2 with this thing are just mush. I mean, they're just a jumble. But that's what old lenses looked like back then as well. The out of focus areas were just messy. So if you focus at 2 meters on your subject and you're in a forest setting, everything behind your subject is going to be really, really mushy and soft and chaotic almost in its out of focus aspects. That could get interesting for, you know, nice portraits, soft portraits, that kind of thing. At infinity, its softness gives you that appearance of really old pictures that were not critically sharp. And it would be great for things like film noir, pictorialism, anything of those old approaches where you can, you know, exploit the fact that this thing is not critically sharp at long ranges at infinity, where everything is uniformly soft. And that's where this starts to get interesting as a creative potential. Considering this thing is so cheap, I mean, it's like $85 Canadian, $60 US. I mean, you can afford to buy it as a niche lens. And as I say, for close range shooting, portraits, street photography, that sort of thing, it's quite usable. It will focus properly. The focus peaking works at short ranges. So that's something to think about. If you have a niche application for this lens, go for it. If you want a general purpose lens that, focuses reliably all of the time, has good contrast, no, this is not your lens. So give that some thought, consider how you might want to use it and consider it so cheap. It's worth having if you have a niche application for it. And it gives you an option beyond, beautifully sharp lenses like this, 27 millimeter Voigtlander or the Fujifilm 27 millimeter. These have way outperform these. So, it's something to think about, something to consider, and it's something to have some fun with where you're not doing all the same thing all of the time. So, give that some thought. It's, as I say, I think it's worth it as a niche lens, but as a general purpose lens, not so much. Cheers.